Alright, a little video summary for Dad on the Camry work that's being done here. This started with taking off the valve cover, which required this wire harness to be removed from in and about around the top of the valve cover, which required, well, just taking some stuff off over here. This thing, yeah, air box. So once all the connections to the coils and intake were disconnected, believe it or not, there's probably 15 of them. That thing was able to come off, and then getting this cover out required, of course, taking the belts off, taking the harmonic balancer off from down below. The tensioners, they mount to the cover. The alternator, which was mounted up here, and then below that there's the water pump. Took that off. It actually looked like that might have been replaced already. And the AC compressor is sitting on a jack stand down there. I just had to remove it from its 4 mounting locations, but no doubt the lines are still connected to it. Couple lines in and out. These are they call them as phasers. The left side is the intake phaser, and that's the one that's given the error code. The right side is the exhaust phaser. So this car does actually adjust for cam rotation, advancing it or retarding it based on whatever the computer wants to do, and it does that through these ports up here, which actually some of these holes feed the irrigation network for squirting oil on top of the cam, and the other one provides pressure to the phaser. Same is true over here. These gaskets are all flattened out and hardened, so that wasn't operating as well as it should be. And here is the cover. In fact, here's the irrigation, as I called it, irrigation network. That's pressure is supplied to it through here, and then of course here's the holes that we were just looking at, and that is fed by a couple solenoid valves. You see those couple holes right here? Yeah, those solenoid valves are important. They slide there. It's a 2-position valve. I can find it up here. There's the coils. Here's the solenoid valve. It slides back and forth. It has some ports on it that open in one direction or the other, depending on what the computer wants to do. It feeds the cam. Those are the coils. Here's the chain. Here's the crank sprocket driving it. Here's a chain tensioner, oil-operated chain tensioner. It pushes on this rail it pushes on this rail that pivots. It pushes right here. Pushes on that rail that pivots. And what do we got here? That's a bracket. The alternator. Here's the new motor mount. The other one was broken. I just got the new one put together. One chain tensioner, another chain tensioner. The shroud came off in order to get the this out so that I could more easily get to the compressor and get the get the cover out. Now the cover, here's the outside of the cover. So there's the crank seal goes down in the bottom. Just inside the crank seal, there's a drive here for the oil pump. Here's the oil pump. I honestly didn't expect to find an oil pump in here, but what do I know until I take it apart. There's an access door to get to the chain tensioner so that you don't have to go through all this cover removal. Here's an access to get to the intake phaser, and then you could potentially get that off if you can loosen the chain from up above without taking the cover off. That's kind of tricky. The exhaust phaser, in fact, was coming apart and rubbing on the cover here, but I think it's still okay. I hammered it back together. There was this collar on here that was rubbing. You can see it's lost some of its polish, or it got polished, whatever you want to say. It took the oil stain off of it. And I took it apart. That spring wasn't an assembly issue, so I was able to get that back together. These are items that they put tamper-proof screws on. Typically Torx are 6-point. These are 5-point, and so I had to order that in order to get this apart and check it out. Same is true over here. In fact, this one's still taken apart. There's a piston that goes in this hole right here, and I'm still sizing up. I was sizing up a different spring to put a heavier spring in here, because a big problem with these cars is that the piston that goes in here doesn't push hard enough with that spring to go into its locking position. And this is actually in its unlocked position right now. Its locking position has a hole back in there. Huh, how come we can't see it? I thought I saw it the other day. But this is a vane, like a vane pump, that just rotates, 30 degrees or something. I have that piston out right now. In fact, here it is right here with its spring. I was looking on McMaster for a specific spring, and because I was able to measure all the aspects of this, I put it on a force displacement machine at work to get a spring rate value. I couldn't find one that was, simply 20-25% more. I was needing to go 50% more on a standard spring off of McMaster, so that was a bit too much. I didn't want to go with that. So now my idea is to put a something in the bottom of the pocket where the spring goes. Just for some reason this thing's not focusing down in that pocket very well. But the depth of this pocket, of course, is going to have an effect on the spring position. There's the peg that goes into the opposite end of that goes through the backside of the phaser. If I make the pocket shallower with something down in the bottom, then it will put the spring into a further loaded position, and I can add whatever I want. I'm thinking about 100 thou worth of thickness down in there to get another 20% worth of push for the spring. Some guys online were doing weird things. One guy, he's actually a mechanic. I don't think he's a Toyota mechanic, but he pulled the spring out and stretched it open in a tensile direction, and then added a spring out of a ballpoint pen into the middle, and that's pretty scary. You'd think these coils would hang up on one another if you have one spring inside of another, so I'm not hip on that idea. Otherwise I could have ordered something online to do just that, but I'm not too hip on that idea. Yeah, so I'm gonna put a screw or a nail down in there. I'm gonna hone the thickness to the head. Hopefully, if I can find something that I don't have to grind too much, and get it to where I want it, and that'll leave a stem on it where I can pull it out again if it gets stuck down in there, you know, if things don't work out, worst case scenario. Yeah, so I'm getting parts in. Today's Monday. I'm getting parts in on Monday or Wednesday and Thursday. In the meantime, I'm gonna rebuild the tensioners a little bit. They don't seem to be too bad, but there's no reason not to take them apart and see if I can oil them a little bit. The wheels on them aren't too bad. Replacing them, they're about $100 a piece, and they're not difficult to get to, so it's no reason to jump into spending a couple $100 more on that. Gonna take the crank seal out from in there. I've got another one of those coming that's included in a cover gasket set that includes oil pump, gaskets. This is feeding the oil pump, so gasket for the oil pump, a new crank seal, and then some liquid RTV for outer edges of the cover. Whether I use that one or a Permatex, I might just use a Permatex. This chain is reportedly still good based on some tech information I get online from a Toyota tech. They put these paint marks on here. Here's cam paint marks, and then further from them is this red crank paint mark that lines up with marks on the crank and on the cam phasers. According to him, if these aren't discolored and the paint's still there, then the chain didn't overheat and it's not an issue. And so he feels that this chain is superior to anything else you're going to buy. Well, I happen to find a brand new ASIN branded chain online. And ASIN is a supplier to Toyota. Toyota owns like half of ASIN, so it's like a Toyota company. I feel it's probably going to be factory original type equipment. So I'm going to replace it because that is a common failure mode for the error code that we're getting, which is a input error code we're getting is an input cam position to crank position. And there happens to be sensors located on the backside for each cam, and then there's a sensor located down below for the crank position. There's the connector for it, in fact. There's the crank. So it actually looks at this sprocket looking dealy bob down here to understand where its position is, and it peers through the cover. So I'm in the process of cleaning up the surfaces so I can get the gasket back on successfully. I wiped that down, scraped it off a little bit, but that was a caked mess of junk. This cover is probably the source of driveway stains, and I've been asking Parker to put it in the street most of the time. So when that's fixed, when this is done, hopefully it won't be leaking anymore. And then the only other thing I want to do is an exhaust leak on this thing. Then it won't sound like a beater or leave spills like a beater. Thermostat location. I actually thought this thermostat was going to be in a different location. Gosh, the information I get online about this motor, there's like 2 flavors of it within the same years. I don't know how that happens. This motor is used in the RAV4 and the Camry, so I get a lot of RAV4 examples of how to get this done. But anyway, that's the gist of it, and I'm going to do a little bit of work today in preparation. Talk soon. Bye.